Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today we're combining embossing paste with Spectrum Noir alcohol ink refills. Embossing paste is a fantastic medium, even more so since it can be colored with other mediums like alcohol inks. And that's what I've done here on the focal of my card. This image has been stenciled with a gold embossing paste that was tinted with green alcohol ink. And then I've sprinkled embossing powder over the top of it to give it an added shine. So I've actually got three mediums combining to create a really effective card focal. Even better, it is super easy to do. So let's take a look. First, I need to have something to stencil onto, and I'm using a plain white map cardstock for that, and I need something to stencil with. And I'm using the Mini Herbarium by the Crafter's Workshop, and I want this image right here. As you can see, I've used this before. And I'm just going to simply place this down onto the center of my white cardstock. And you can mask this off with stencil tape or masking tape. I'm just going to use a sticky note because I know that I have a tendency to get into this area here. So I'm just going to place down a Post-it note to cover that, and that's going to mask off that area. It's also going to kind of hold things together a little bit. When I get into the actual stenciling, I'm going to use my fingers to hold this down. Now that I've got this on here, I can bring in my embossing paste and my coloring medium. So I'm working with the Wendy Vecchi Studio 490 embossing paste in metallic gold. I'm going to be tinting that with Spectrum Noir alcohol ink refills, and this is JG1, so that's really pretty green color here. And I just need to have a little plastic palette and palette knife to do my mixing. Now, as I'm getting out the embossing paste with the palette knife, you can see I don't need to get out very much of it because I have a pretty small area to stencil, but I did want you to see the nice consistency of this and how nice and thick it is. I'm just going to put this right into my plastic palette, my repurposed lid. Now you may be saying, well, Sarah, you know, Wendy does have a perfectly good white embossing paste. Why wouldn't you use white? And I will tell you, that was my first inclination. And then I discovered I was out of my white embossing paste. So I thought I'll try it with the metallic gold. And what I discovered is that when I went to add my green, it didn't turn into a muddy mess the way I thought it would. By simply adding one little drop of this beautiful green, I still colored the embossing paste, but it had this wonderful warmth, this beautiful golden undertone, and a slight metallic sheen that I would not have gotten if I'd used the plain white. So this was one of those kind of happy accidents, I guess, when you don't have the supply that you're kind of counting on, and you have to try it with something else instead. So you could use the white embossing paste, and I think it would be gorgeous. It would just give you a different kind of tone to it. It would be a bit of a colder tone. So here I've got this mixed in, and you can see I've got a really pretty green, but I've also got that nice shimmer and shine on there too. I'm going to scrape off the excess and put my palette knife aside, and then I can bring back in my stenciled piece on here. Now you could use the palette knife to apply your embossing paste. I'm going to use my hand. And I like to do that because it just gives me a little bit more control. And I can get into these smaller areas without getting it underneath some of the finer areas. So I'm just going to use my finger to apply this on here. As I'm applying it, it's also kind of tacking down the rest of the stencil. So come around in here. Good thing I have that Post-it note on there. You don't get the rest of the stencil on here too. And the stencil is wonderful because it does give you lots of different design options. So you can use all of the images or just pick one or two. Okay, so I've got this on here, and then I'm just going to clean off my finger quickly and remove my Post-it note. And then I'm also going to lift off this piece here. Now it looks like I could have done a little bit better around there, but I think you get the gist of how easy this is. Now my final step is going to be bringing in some of the Earth Tone Honey regular embossing powder, and I'm simply going to sprinkle this in to the wet embossing paste. And this is just going to give me an added dimension, an added touch. So I'll bring in a piece of white scrap paper and just tap off the excess. Now, I can go ahead and let this dry and use it as is. I'm going to add a little bit more on top though. And I wanted to give kind of a spattered effect and really mute down some of the white background. So I'm going to bring in another color of alcohol ink, and this is LG3. And I'm just going to squeeze in a couple of drops here of this color. And then I'm going to dilute it, not with water, but with rubbing alcohol. And this is just a rubbing alcohol I picked up at the pharmacy. So that's going to dilute it. I'm going to take an old toothbrush. You could also use a stipple brush, whatever you have on hand. And I'm going to spatter this on here. And it's okay to do it right on top of the wet embossing paste. It's not going to hurt that at all. And then you've got a really nice spattered dimensional look. So you have the raised dimension, you've got the color and the shine, and you also have a little bit of spattering in the background. Just let this dry, and then you will be ready to add it to the front of your card. So I'm going to bring back in my original card here. We can take a look. I've kept things fairly autumnal because it is the autumn right here, right now. And I wanted a nice soft brown effect. So I've used some gold pattern paper back here, and then also some craft cardstock and some brown cardstock, wrapping it with twine and adding a little bit of gold silk ribbon. The With Thanks is from the Everyday Sentiment stamp set from Wow Embossing, same people who brought the embossing powder to you. And I think this has a really nice warm effect. Quite simple, quite easy to do. If you are thinking, well, I'm watching this video in springtime, and maybe you want a brighter look, well, you can get the same effect with the embossing and the alcohol ink, but you can put it up onto a different color of cardstock, and that's going to give you a brighter, springier effect. So two very different looks. It just depends on what you're trying to create. So this is how you can make a very simple card focal using embossing paste and alcohol inks. I hope you enjoyed today's show. For more ideas and inspiration, please stop by my website at saranaumann.com. If you enjoyed today's video, I invite you to subscribe to Studio SN on YouTube, and I'll keep you updated with a new video every Wednesday. Thank you for joining me on Studio SN, and I'll see you again next time.